Under a gloomy and suffocating atmosphere, as if swallowed by darkness, the light faded, leaving only the echo of heavy, ragged breaths. Twisted smiles appeared on the faces of warriors on a battlefield stained red with fresh blood, as a crimson light rained down relentlessly. Leaving no escape, people fell one by one, but on the very brink of life and death. Faint glimmers of hope stubbornly pushed through. We finally made it this far, facing a terrifying rage, but our will still burned brightly. If we defeat it, Gray muttered, everything will be over too quickly. But just then, a sharp, cold light pierced straight through his chest, and a sudden wave of pain made him freeze, his body trembling as blood gushed from the fatal wound. Gray's eyes grew vacant, his dream seemingly coming to an end as his body lost all strength. His legs gave out, and his entire body collapsed helplessly, blood pooling on the ground around the desperate fallen corpses. He slowly began to accept that this was the end. Looking at the rubble and his fallen comrades, Gray's heart grew heavy with shame. Am I really going to die without accomplishing anything? His eyes blazed with hatred, directed at the creature hovering in midair. One day, an unknown calamity had appeared, threatening to wipe out the entire continent. The enemy of humanity, the Purger, continued to sow destruction. Gray watched the warrior who proudly blocked the attack with his shield. He placed his last shred of hope in them. The group of warriors protecting humanity included Brian Miller, the young man who survived a terrifying meteor impact, known as the Shield of the World. The blue-haired girl, Bella Onbright, the great sage whose power was equivalent to an entire army, summoned shimmering magic circles, ready to face any danger. Beside her was Jacob Bloomfield, the archer in green armor, whose every arrow was astonishingly sharp and precise. He had once taken down a high-ranked dragon beast with a single shot. His title of God Archer was well earned. And Ami, the golden-eyed swordswoman who never faltered before danger, with speed that overcame every obstacle. She was the strongest sword saint in history. Looking at them, Gray was overcome with a sense of inferiority. And us, he thought bitterly, we're just the support unit, used and then discarded. The truth was harsher than he imagined. They were merely sacrificial pawns. Watching the warriors' masterful combat techniques, Gray couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. They're on a completely different level, he thought to himself. Witnessing how the graduates from the World Union Academy easily closed in on the enemy, the gap between him and them became painfully obvious, like an insurmountable abyss. The Purger was being suppressed by Bella's magic orbs. Gray lay trembling on the ground, his heart heavy, wondering if it even mattered whether the support team was there. Meanwhile, Ami continued her assault. Her powerful sword strikes made the enemy stagger. The feeling of humiliation in Gray's heart boiled over. We trained hard too, he screamed internally. With her terrifying speed, Ami forced the Purger to remain constantly on the defensive. A final powerful attack managed to wound it, but instead of showing fear, it seemed delighted. Oh, you managed to wound me? Its body began to radiate a brilliant red aura, stronger than ever before. Not bad. Suddenly, the Purger created a vortex of sword energy, and long blades shot forward. In a single move, everyone else was killed, their bodies sliced to pieces. The brutal sight left Gray stunned, with only the villain left standing. His pupils constricted in shock. So he's finally getting serious? Gray couldn't believe it. He had wiped out the entire squad with just one sword strike, and all this time he was just toying with them. He slowly closed his eyes, accepting the grim reality that there was no way to win. But then Gray snapped back to reality. Wait a minute, how long has it been since my heart was pierced? Staring at his reflection in a pool of blood, he wondered how he was still alive. The dripping sound of blood mingled with a mysterious voice. I've found you. Gray felt as if he was being pulled into another dimension. Before him was a magical light that opened into a black hole. Come here, you who possess immense power, the voice echoed. Stunned, Gray stepped into a new world, resembling a desolate city, and the wounds on his body were healed. Where am I? The afterlife? He turned around, feeling as if someone was watching him. A mysterious figure in a black cloak appeared. Who are you? Gray asked. The figure was Granos, his face obscured but exuding a dignified aura. You're not dead yet? Granos explained. Your wounds have been healed. The ancient magical space, enveloped in a brilliant golden light, left Gray astonished. On a magical screen, his grievously wounded body from before was displayed. Did you heal me? He asked. Granos calmly replied, No, that was your own power. Gray touched his chest, still doubtful. My power? Granos admitted, Even I cannot accurately analyze your power, but I believe it's even stronger than the Purgers. If you learn how to control it, Gray remained skeptical. Are you saying I can win this fight? Granos replied coldly but firmly. I'm not making any promises, but I believe we must destroy him. Before he could finish his sentence, Granos lunged forward, piercing Gray's chest just as before. But this time, a magic circle protected him. Go! Granos whispered. I will lend you my power. Everything unfolded like a dream. Gray returned to the battlefield, where his body was still lying on the ground. He gripped his sword tightly, struggling to stand up, and the sword suddenly transformed. Its tip turned a mysterious black, becoming a dark sword. Granos' voice echoed, This is your power. My power is not something ordinary mortals can perceive. Gray readied himself, and the noise alerted the Purger. The Purger had just turned around when Gray closed in, delivering a powerful slash as a sharp aura erupted from him, and the Purger felt an immense source of mana. Impossible! He recoiled in astonishment. Does someone this powerful actually exist? Without hesitation, Gray advanced with absolute focus, searching for his enemy's weakness. Don't underestimate me, the Purger counterattacked. In the blink of an eye, Gray's body was sliced apart. He watched in horror as his body disintegrated, blood splattering everywhere. The Purger gloated. Impressive. You forced me to use my full power. But from behind him, Gray's blazing red eyes flared up as if to incinerate everything. The Purger's body felt as if it was being crushed by an invisible force. Gray was enveloped in dark magic, standing majestically in midair, holding the dark sword as black smoke from the blade merged with his body. The Purger panicked. What the hell? He hastily activated a shield, but it was too late. Half of Gray's face was distorted, and the now gigantic dark sword slashed straight down, shattering the shield. The strike tore through the Purger's body, leaving a massive gash on the ground. Are you even human? The Purger screamed in despair. Gray, his voice filled with rage, retorted, That should be my question. Facing the murderer, he stood tall as a symbol of survival and vengeance. Suddenly, a maniacal laugh echoed out. Gray quickly backed away, planting his feet firmly. Even after taking a deep slash, the Purger stubbornly clung to life. He spoke, his voice deep and hoarse yet filled with astonishment. You're still alive? Your power is truly not to be underestimated. His breathing was heavy, coming in ragged gasps as blood streamed down. He brought his face close to Gray's, his eyes flashing with a cold, menacing glint. Well, I'll just have to crush you again and again until you die. Unwilling to argue with a madman, Gray didn't answer, instead pouring all his strength into his swing, unleashing a razor-sharp slash that tore through the air toward the Purger. The blade roared, its force so immense that it made the Purger's body tremble. The wound gaped open, and a strange yellow fluid gushed from his body, accompanied by agonizing screams mixed with venomous curses. But suddenly, the Purger stopped, clasping his two hands together, his movements slow, as if he were summoning something from the depths. His body suddenly began to radiate ethereal light, as brilliant as a full moon. The wings on his back turned iridescent, shimmering like a galaxy. He pointed his palms toward each other, and a magic circle began to form, hovering in midair and emitting an energy that made the very air tremble. Time itself suddenly began to warp, and night abruptly fell, blanketing everything in an eerie silence. The Purger murmured, his deep voice like a harbinger of fate. Time's up. A brilliant moon appeared, its cold silver light shining down. Gray frowned in confusion. What the? Did it just suddenly become night? He gave a cold, sharp smile, completely unfazed, and no one noticed that Gray had silently appeared behind the Purger, swift as a phantom. His voice rang out, full of challenge. So what? Before his enemy could react, Gray delivered a fatal blow straight to his neck. But surprisingly, his blade hit an invisible barrier as hard as steel. Gray froze, his eyes flashing in astonishment. The Purger burst out laughing, his voice full of arrogance. It's useless. In this dreamscape, nothing can harm me. Stop your pointless struggle, Gray, and take a final look at the stars. Gray stood frozen, not out of fear, but because of a brilliant light from the sky that was hurtling straight toward him. The light resembled a shooting star, growing larger at a terrifying speed, burning as if it would incinerate everything in its path. The Purger's voice seeped into Gray's mind like a malicious whisper. It's beautiful, isn't it? And now that star is so very close? The massive fireball slammed down, exploding right where Gray was standing, and creating an earth-shattering blast. Everything nearby was turned to ash, and the very ground was pulverized. The Purger flew up, gazing down triumphantly at the wreckage. A deep crater had formed, but there was no sign of Gray. He laughed heartily. You can't be revived if you've been turned to dust. But from above, a shimmering magic portal suddenly appeared, confusing the Purger. What? The portal slowly became clearer, resembling a giant clock face engraved with runes of time. A deep voice echoed out. It was Granos. You've gathered an incredible amount of power, but this should be enough to send you back now. The Purger panicked, his entire body trembling. Impossible. Granos, sitting calmly above, continued to speak. Can you hear me? Oh, wielder of great power, using all of my strength, I shall send you back to the past. The Purger's rage erupted, and he screamed, Granos, you bastard! Ignoring his fury, Kronos calmly continued, "This is all I can do for you." The clock of time began to turn backward, its hour hand roaring like destiny. As the hand struck one, Kronos' voice faded. "I entrust the fate of this world to you. Perhaps this isn't the end, but a new beginning for Gray." Gray woke up, his body lying on a lush green carpet of grass. The sky was clear, and gentle sunlight poured down. This world was strangely peaceful, as if it had never been ravaged. He slowly sat up, his mind hazy. Where am I? Looking around, the vibrant scenery seemed to heal his heart. In the distance, the mountains, forests, houses, and villages looked heart-wrenchingly familiar. Geno Village? How? He was stunned. Everything felt like a dream, a nostalgic memory of a place he once called home. Geno Village, the place destroyed 15 years ago. How was it still here, as vibrant as if it had never vanished? Kronos' final words suddenly echoed in his mind. Gray was startled. Did what he said really happen? The rush of emotion made the wound on his wrist throb. Looking down, he recognized an old scar from the days he was bullied and despised. His body trembled slightly as painful memories flooded back. "No," he told himself firmly. "I can't let them beat me up again." In the past, the weak Gray didn't have the strength to fight back. They were too strong, and he was just helpless. But now he refused to repeat that fate. Destroying the Purgers was no longer an impossible dream. Gray stood up and walked toward the forest, reassuring himself. "I'll deal with them when I'm stronger. For now, I don't want to get hurt again." Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. In front of him was Bear's gang, every one of them looking menacing. Bear spoke in a condescending tone. "I've been looking for you," Gray sighed in annoyance. What a pain. They threw a sword at him, ordering him to take it. Gray didn't move, his gaze cold. Seeing this, the gang approached, their voices mocking. "Playing dumb? Let's have a little spar." Gray tried to get out of it, worried about his unhealed wound. "Oh, a spar, sorry, but my wound hasn't healed yet. Thanks for the offer, but I can't join in." Bear and his lackeys had no intention of letting him go. They sneered, their contempt obvious. Burr pretended to reassure him. "Don't worry, the blade is really dull, it's safe." Gray looked him straight in the eye, calling him out. "No matter how dull the blade is, it's still a lump of iron. What if it hits a vital spot?" Before he could finish, Burr cut him off, his voice harsh. "Shut your mouth!" He slammed the sword on the ground, his eyes blazing. "Do you have the right to refuse? If you don't like the sword, how about we go bare-handed?" Burr shouted, full of confidence. Gray was stunned. He wanted to fight him while he was unarmed. What kind of fight is this? A memory surfaced in Gray's mind. Before his regression, a former military doctor had told him that his swordsmanship never improved because of his childhood injuries. He realized that his life as a failure probably started right here. Not wanting to repeat his regrets, not wanting to live a meaningless life, Gray made up his mind. Unexpectedly, he unconsciously dodged Burr's attack. He was surprised but didn't stop, continuing his assault. Gray dodged again, as if by instinct. So slow? Frustrated, Bear attacked with all his might, but Gray dodged every single blow, each swing of the sword missing its mark. He suddenly realized his body was faster and more agile than ever before. Burr's gang was stunned. One of them muttered, "The way he's moving, it's like he's a completely different person." Gray picked up the sword from the ground, his grip tightening, his eyes burning. "I may not have my old body, but the memories of all my battles are still here." Burr attacked from above, intending to finish him off. "Take this." But Gray parried the blow, the force sending Bear stumbling backward. Gray was worried, but this time, it was for his opponent. He fell just like that? Would it be okay to fight a novice like him? He focused, determined not to back down. No, he didn't deserve any pity. They had tormented him just because he couldn't fight. Gray's eyes turned cold, determined to change his humiliating past. He unleashed a slash that sent Burr's sword flying. He panicked. Damn it. How was it so easy? Gray stepped forward, his voice low but powerful. "Maybe you've never been trained on how to block a sword." He took a wide stance, startling Burr, "But don't worry. You guys taught me that as long as the sword is dull, it's okay to hit people with it." Gray raised his sword, a cold smile on his face, but his eyes burned with hostility. A single slash cut across Bear's shoulder, and fresh blood spurted out, making him panic. The hot drops of blood splattering on his face were a stinging reminder of the pain. Bear flinched, clutching his shoulder tightly and screaming in agony. The situation went far beyond Gray's expectations, as this incident wasn't part of his plan. He was stunned. Was he hesitating? Wasn't the blade supposed to be dull? Doubtfully, he raised the sword to inspect it. Sure enough, the blade was chipped and riddled with cracks. Gray paused, confused. It was clearly dull. If this sword had been sharp, the guy would probably be dead by now. But that didn't make him soften in the slightest. Gray's eyes turned icy, showing no mercy. He swung the sword, smashing it across Burr's face. The force of the blow made his nose bleed profusely, broke his teeth, and sent his entire body flying backward to tumble across the ground. Gray remained unmoved, coldly thinking to himself, I'll just keep this dull sword. He stepped closer, completely overpowering Burr, who was crawling on the ground. Gray sneered, his voice low but sharp. What's wrong? Screaming so loudly. Burr trembled, tears welling up, but Gray continued to taunt him. Where's the guy who said a dull sword would be safe? His face relaxed into a faint smile, but his eyes blazed with unconcealed rage. That was you, wasn't it? Gray growled. Bear was too terrified to say a word. One might think he had learned his lesson. But suddenly Bear turned to his cronies and yelled, What are you guys standing there for? Get him! The chubby guy, after witnessing the fight, hesitated noticeably and muttered, He's too strong. But the one with the mushroom cut was still aggressive, not giving a damn, and shouted, Charge! Get him from behind! The whole group rushed forward at once, surrounding Gray from all sides. He stood tall, his gaze cold and fearless. What's this? You want another round? The group attacked frantically, but Gray stood still, completely unfazed. He murmured, his voice as low as fate itself. I was going to let it slide, but now. All that remained were pained groans as each one of them lay on the ground, bruised and battered. Looking at Burr and his cronies kneeling, Gray suddenly remembered the dark days of his past. Back then, he used to tremble before them. He spoke in a sharp tone. You guys are from the Shia swordsmanship dojo, right? Bear didn't dare to look him in the eye, but still nodded in acknowledgement. The chubby guy mumbled, We thought we were strong enough, so we haven't been going there lately. Gray sighed, exasperated by their childish thinking. Strong enough, really? He shook his head, telling himself not to expect too much from the dojo, but it still had its uses. Resting the sword on his shoulder, Gray ordered, Introduce me to the dojo. That place only accepts people through referrals, right? Burr flinched, his eyes filled with humiliation. Can't you ask someone else? If I tell the master that I lost, I can't even imagine what she'll say. Gray swung his sword through the air, and the sound of the blade cutting the wind made Burr flinch. So, should we continue where we left off? Burr's face darkened, scared as if he'd seen a ghost. He abandoned his crew and bolted for his life, shouting back, I'll give you the recommendation. The dojo is this way. The rest of his crew was stunned. What? Burr, don't leave us behind. A little while later, Burr and his lackeys led Gray to a bustling town. Gray was curious. Why do you want to go to the dojo? He answered nonchalantly. This dojo offers a recommendation to the academy, doesn't it? Bear had been skipping for days and only vaguely recalled hearing something about that. Gray nodded. That's the reason I want to go. The long-haired guy chimed in. I think you're already strong enough without the academy. Gray was hard on himself, not letting the praise sway him. If he were truly strong enough, how great would that be? The memory of the battle with the Purger flooded back, making him pensive. Even the strongest team in the world couldn't touch him. Even after using all his strength, Gray still couldn't deal any damage. The image of the Purger empowering himself spurred him on. How much stronger do I have to get to defeat him? Burr signaled that they had arrived. The ultimate reason Gray came to the dojo was to become stronger. In that moment, he sensed a dark power. Even for just a second, he recalled his training days with the Sword Saint, those moments of absolute focus on his swordsmanship. If I had spent more time training under the same conditions as the Sword Saint, the outcome of the battle might have been different. Gray suddenly realized his mission for returning to the past. This must be why Granos sent me here. A woman's voice rang out, pulling Gray back to reality. So, in short, what are you trying to tell me? She was addressing Burr's group. The woman before them was undoubtedly their master, questioning them. Did you use the techniques I taught you to bully a civilian, only to get your butts kicked? That was Saria, the instructor of the Shia swordsmanship dojo, a young woman with platinum hair covering one eye, her sharp gaze full of authority. Bear tried to justify himself. It wasn't like that. We just wanted to have a friendly spar. Saria became enraged, slapping Bear and sending him flying. The rest of the group trembled as she scolded them sternly. Who gave you permission to make excuses? If you consider beating up an unarmed person a friendly spar, then what I just did was also just a friendly spar, right? Her wooden sword pointed right at Burr's eye, her disappointed gaze unforgiving. Get out and never come back. From now on, none of you are to call yourselves students of this dojo. Bear's group trudged away, supporting each other in humiliation. Saria turned to Gray and knelt on one knee, saying sincerely, I apologize for that. It seems my former students have caused you trouble. Gray waved his hand. Don't worry about it. Saria thanked him for his kindness and got straight to the point. I heard earlier that you wanted a recommendation to the academy. Gray nodded. She pulled a wooden sword from a rack. As an apology for the trouble caused by Bear and his group, I need to verify your abilities before I can write a letter of recommendation. She handed the wooden sword to Gray, who took it and nodded. Understood. The two prepared to fight. Saria yielded. You can go first. Start whenever you're ready. Gray didn't hesitate. Here I come. He lunged forward with incredible speed. Saria skillfully defended, her eyes never leaving his blade. She thought to herself, his swordsmanship is very practical, as if he's been through countless battles at his age. It's astonishing. Gray lowered his stance, attacking from the side. Saria acknowledged that Bear and his crew were not on his level. Gray's movements were sharp, with no wasted motion, as if he were self-taught yet carrying the mark of high-level swordsmanship. Saria wondered, did someone teach him? But his swordsmanship is still raw. He's a diamond in the rough. Saria starts to fight seriously. It's a shame to end it so soon, but it's time to bring down the curtain. She speeds up, but Gray is not outmatched. With his keen senses, he dodges the blow, even keeping up with her movements. Saria is secretly amazed. How strange. Why isn't he faltering? How can he keep up with me? Her body is gradually tiring, but Gray remains steady. She wavers. I only meant to test his abilities, so why am I going all out now? Gray swings his sword powerfully, forcing Saria to step back. She is startled. It was just a single slash. But why do I have such a bad feeling? The floor cracks under the force of the sword, and Saria, both amazed and amused, declares it ends here. But that confidence quickly vanishes when she realizes in shock that her wooden sword has been broken by Gray's slash. Caught off guard by the unexpected situation, Saria can't react in time, only managing to stammer out a cry. Her wooden sword clatters onto the cold floor, shattered, a testament to her opponent's terrifying power. Looking at the scene before him, Gray thinks to himself, this feeling is exactly like that time, so I really do possess that power. Suddenly, a sharp, unexpected pain strikes him, so intense that it forces him to his knees with a loud cry. Seeing Gray's strange behavior, Saria asks worriedly, what is it? Are you okay? Gray grits his teeth, his face contorted in pain, guessing to himself that his body can't handle such immense power. Immediately, Gray tries to calm himself, shakily getting to his feet. He speaks hesitantly, his voice weak. I'm fine. Sweat beads on his forehead as he thinks to himself, I can barely stand. I shouldn't abuse this power. Looking at Saria in front of him, he hesitates, wondering if he should tell her about this. Sensing Gray's strange gaze, Saria frowns in confusion. After composing himself, Gray quickly dismisses his initial thought. No, it's better not to. She'd hardly believe me even if I told her. Besides, this is something I can't even control myself. Seeing the tense situation, Gray scratches his head, awkwardly explaining to Saria, I just got a little distracted. Hearing Gray's words, Saria remains silent, her eyes filled with disbelief at what she just witnessed. She stares in shock at the broken wooden sword, thinking to herself that breaking her sword with a dull wooden one is impossible. She comes to a conclusion, he must have realized it too. Seeing Saria standing motionless for so long, Gray starts to get nervous. He asks hesitantly, is something wrong? The more she observes the small student before her, the more Saria wonders, is he not going to say anything about it? She closes her eyes, her expression serious for a long moment. After thinking, she turns and walks to a wooden crate, tosses the broken sword inside, and says, all right, you said you wanted a recommendation to an academy, right? Hearing the question, Gray looks tense and nods in reply. Yes, I heard you could do that. As soon as he finishes speaking, Saria confirms it firmly. Yes, of course I can recommend you to the most prestigious academy in the kingdom, the Royal Knight Academy. She pauses, hesitates, then adds, but I advise you not to go there. Saria's expression darkens, and her voice lowers as she emphasizes, you are not suited for that place. Her words feel like they're dragging Gray's spirit into a dark abyss. He tightens his grip on the wooden sword, his mind filled with resentful thoughts. I know I'm not strong enough. In the end, I can't do anything. As if understanding his thoughts, Saria speaks up, shattering his disappointment. The place you should go is the World Union Academy. Her firm words left Gray stunned, his pupils constricted in shock. She continued, her voice full of conviction. The place you need to go isn't the most prestigious academy in the kingdom, but the most prestigious academy in the world. The statement startled Gray, his heart pounding. The World Union Academy, isn't that where the Sword Saint and the others came from? Excited, he asked in a loud voice. Can someone like me really get in there? Saria shook her head helplessly. You can't, she explained. You must have realized by now that your current body isn't qualified to be a swordsman. Saria was stern, her gaze seeming to evaluate him. If it were the Royal Academy, you might get by on skill, but that's not possible at the World Union Academy. How could you reach that level with such a weak body? He couldn't refute her harsh words. Gray stammered, I guess so. His eyes filled with disappointment as heavy thoughts surfaced. Everyone at that academy is a monster. With this body, I don't stand a chance. In the dim light of the room, Saria spoke coldly. Giving up already? There are still 9 months until the entrance exam. Knowing how much time was left, Gray was flustered. Only 9 months. Saria agreed. Yes, that might not be enough time, but her voice immediately hardened. But trust in me. Her voice carried a threatening tone. For these 9 months, are you ready to endure hellish torment? Gray looked at his palm and answered vaguely. I don't want to endure torment, but I'll do it. He clenched his fist and placed it over his chest, his voice heroic. For the next 9 months, I'll be in your care. Hearing his answer, Saria gave a satisfied smile. A good answer. The atmosphere suddenly grew quiet. Gray trembled as he listened to Saria speak. Saria's expression became terrifying, her voice menacing. Let the days of hell begin. Immediately after, images of Gray's arduous days flashed by, mixed with Saria's tough demeanor. She always screamed, pushing him during every training session. Time flew by, and 8 months later, Gray's body had become toned and much stronger. Looking at him, Saria mused in praise. You've gotten much stronger. Pride was evident on her face, a gentle smile as she crossed her arms. I have nothing left to teach you. From now on, walk with confidence. Gray was taken aback, asking with surprise in his eyes, but there's still 1 month until the exam? Seeing his surprise, Saria explained, You'll face difficulties in an unfamiliar place, so it's best to get there early. She held out her hand, offering him a brown pouch. This is money for your trip and enough for food for 1 month. Feeling her thoughtfulness, Gray awkwardly waved his hands in refusal. But leaving 1 month early, isn't that too soon? The golden sunlight streamed through the window, elongating the shadows of the master and student, Gray confessed. It's like you're trying to kick me out of the village. Saria smiled gently, her eyes half closed, consoling him. You're overthinking it. Suddenly, Gray mentioned something that startled Saria. I heard there's a goblin nest nearby and the village doesn't have many guards. Saria didn't deny it, replying softly. Ah, yes, there is a nest. She awkwardly turned away, gently explaining, but it has nothing to do with us. She smiled as if everything was fine. We'll get aid from the capital so we don't need to worry. She reassured Gray. Just go take your exam, don't worry. But Gray thought to himself, she's lying. There won't be any aid for the village. And before the village is destroyed, my master will die. An image of Saria, covered in blood and lying motionless on the ground, appeared in Gray's mind. They said she charged into the goblin nest alone and was killed. Even so, Gray pretended not to know and replied calmly, I understand. The easy agreement made Saria slightly suspicious. Gray placed a hand on his chest, expressing his gratitude. Thank you. Gray's gaze was resolute, filled with confidence. I'll be going now. Saria's lips curved into a genuine smile, offering her well wishes. All right, I hope you pass the exam. After Gray left, Saria quietly ventured into the deep forest. Under the night sky, the faint moonlight became more distinct. A skeleton with a sword stuck through its mouth appeared. Saria touched a bloodstain on the ground, murmuring, According to the scout's report, they're over there. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the silent night, startling her. Where are you going? A familiar figure appeared on a high, pitch-black tree branch. It was Gray. Gray put on a fake look of concern and asked, Master, where are you going? While on the move, a loud voice suddenly called out from behind him. Gray. He turned around to see Saria. She spoke, her eyes filled with suspicion. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be on your way to the academy? Gray jumped down from the tree branch and replied, his voice low but sharp. I should be the one asking that question. Didn't she say the capital's army would handle the goblins? Saria waved her hand dismissively and replied, They said they couldn't make it due to an emergency, so I decided to take care of it myself. She added confidently, Besides, I'm more than enough on my own. According to the scout's report, I know the strength of that nest. She sighed, her expression turning thoughtful. The goblin boss is a high-level goblin, and there are about 40 to 50 monsters in the nest. She had to admit, those numbers were a bit troublesome. Gray listened, thinking to himself, a high-level goblin? He recalled a past battle, realizing a goblin's true strength lay not in its physique but in its intelligence and leadership abilities. He spoke up, If you get surrounded, fighting alone is basically a suicide mission. A certainty formed in his mind. Looking Saria straight in the eye, Gray declared resolutely, If I let you go alone, Master, you won't make it back alive, and the village will be destroyed by them. He stressed, I have seen that future with my own eyes. Snapping out of his thoughts, he said, Let me go with you. But Saria refused, her tone firm. I already told you, I'm more than enough. Gray was unshaken, his eyes determined. I don't want to miss the chance to gain real combat experience. Or is it that you think I'll just be in the way? Saria retorted. You know you wouldn't be in my way, she thought to herself. He was stronger than me during our sparring match. She turned to him, her tone softening but still serious. But there's no telling what can happen in a real fight. especially when a monster nest appears out of nowhere like this, she stated firmly. For something this dangerous, it's best for you to wait until you have more combat experience. But Gray was still insistent, his voice sharp. So you really want to go alone? In that case, I have an idea. Saria frowned. What is it? Gray stepped closer and declared, I'll fight you and take you down quickly. And then I'll handle the goblins myself. The air grew still. Gray stood silently, his sword aimed right at her. Saria didn't respond verbally, only smiling lightly. Fine, I give up. She then instructed with a serious look, but you have to promise me one thing. No matter what happens, you must come back safe. Gray lowered his sword and nodded. Okay, I plan to. With that, the two of them ventured deeper into the forest. You too, Master, don't die. Gray added, his tone half joking and half serious. The scene changes to the goblin nest. The two of them talked as they walked through the treacherous terrain, which left no room for escape. Gray remarked, They're really confident, setting up their nest in a place like this, he observed. But that means we can't escape either. This time the monsters are smart, we need to be careful, Gray warned. Saria nodded. I know. Her eyes grew cold. The two of them scouted the area but couldn't find the goblin boss. He's probably in the tent, Gray whispered. Saria nodded, hoping to take down a few of them before the goblin boss showed up. She said in a low voice, Gray, take out the ones in that direction. Gazing at the camp teeming with goblins, they planned their strategy. Saria said, I'll take this side. The goblins looked grotesque, growling threateningly. Gray replied, Got it. Saria gave the signal. All right, let's move. One goblin caught their scent and turned around. Saria lunged forward, swinging her sword with a decisive slash. The monster's head went rolling, and the goblins behind it roared in fury. The entire horde of goblins scrambled to gather and charge at them. On his side, Gray was just as formidable. He effortlessly swung his sword in a clean, sharp arc, giving the goblins no time to react. Blood sprayed everywhere in a chaotic scene, and Saria wasn't backing down either, holding her own against the dense goblin horde. Gray charged in, cutting down several goblins with a single clean sweep of his sword. They paused, surrounded by a pile of monster corpses. Saria praised him. Not bad. Is this really your first time? Gray cautioned. Master, stay sharp. We're just getting started. He was bewildered. It was strange. They were too weak. If that was the case, his master could have handled this alone. Suddenly, a thought struck him. He glanced toward the distant tent, where a pair of glowing red eyes was watching. So grotesque it was chilling. Gray shuddered and yelled, Saria, we have to go. Run! She was surprised. What's wrong? Gray was starting to panic. Just run. Saria was stunned, but obeyed. All right, she replied. And the two of them ran for their lives. Behind them, a goblin was in pursuit. Gray's eyes widened when he realized the goblin looked abnormally powerful. Its every footstep made the ground tremble. He flashed a sinister smile under the moonlight. A high-ranking goblin, he said. Saria nodded. It's an honor for the goblin boss to come to us himself. But Gray suddenly screamed, No, that's not the goblin boss! A grotesque mouth opened wide. From behind, a horde of goblins swarmed forward, their growls a chaotic mess. Saria was terrified. What is that? Gray confirmed, a goblin warlord. That's the real goblin boss. A giant, axe-wielding monster led the goblin horde. Saria snapped back to reality. A goblin warlord? We can't possibly handle a monster like that. Saria panicked, yelling about the high-ranking goblin in front of them. We have to kill this one and run. She swung her sword, slashing its arm and drawing blood, but she was stunned to see the wound begin to heal. Saria was bewildered. It's healing itself? Gray charged forward. It's no use, he explained. The goblin warlord's roar boosts the strength and regenerative abilities of its allies. That's why they're unusually strong, he stressed. We can't take down a single one of them. Gray suddenly came up with a plan. Master, I'm leaving the goblin behind us to you. You don't have to kill it. Just stall for time. Saria turned to him. What are you going to do? Gray replied coldly. There's only one option left, he said with an icy tone. I'm going to destroy that bastard. A sinister and incredibly arrogant smile spread across Gray's face. He swung his sword at the goblin before him. The blade sliced through the air, creating a brilliant arc of light. While fighting, he thought to himself how annoying it was that they kept trying to ambush him. He struck again, the sharp blade lunging straight for the goblin. Refusing to yield, it immediately raised its axe and swung it fiercely at Gray. As he fought back, he calculated his next move. Right now, I just need to focus on wiping out all the enemies in front of me. But in the next instant, the unexpected happened. Gray's sword shattered into countless pieces the moment he swung it. He stared at the broken hilt in his hand with a look of disbelief. His sword couldn't even handle a single enhanced goblin? The goblin wasn't patient enough to wait for Gray to snap out of it. It swung its axe down hard, and the impact sent Gray staggering back. He quickly drew his spare sword to keep fighting. It's a good thing I brought a spare, but this one won't last long either. From a distance, Saria, who was fighting her own group of goblins, shouted, "Gray, use my spare sword." Gray caught the sword and felt a surge of renewed strength. Thank you. He now held two swords, ready for a life-or-death battle with the goblin. Now he had two swords, but it still wasn't enough to wipe out the horde of monsters. Facing the goblin warlord and the goblin standing in his way, Gray sheathed one sword, deciding to focus his attack. He charged toward the goblin, unleashing a brilliant slash of light so powerful it seemed to tear through space itself. The goblin refused to back down, swinging its axe right at Gray's face and drawing blood from his cheek. Gray gritted his teeth, parrying the axe blade with his sword. He roared, unable to hide his frustration. He immediately drew the second sword from his hip again, fighting with all his might against the swarming goblins. A stream of light erupted from the horrifying skull staff. A goblin roared as its eyes began to glow with a brilliant yellow light. Gray was stunned by the sight. What? It can enhance its allies too? After receiving the power-up, the goblin swung its axe at Gray again. He could only do his best to withstand its terrifying new strength. "So you figured out my plan?" the goblin leader roared. Instantly, dozens of goblins charged toward Gray. He remarked to himself, "Your intelligence is certainly nothing to scoff at." Gray's sword clashed with the sharp axe blade, sending sparks flying everywhere. After a fierce struggle, Gray broke free from the axe's lock. He fell back, gathered his momentum, and let out a war cry. Charging forward, he moved like a whirlwind through the goblins, giving them no time to react. Gray swung his sword, trying to take down as many as he could. "I don't have time to deal with them one by one." Suddenly, one goblin managed to grab a hold of Gray, while another charged in, swinging its axe to finish him off, but it ran straight onto Gray's sword and died instantly. Gray suddenly realized their plan. They were intentionally trying to break his sword by throwing themselves onto it. Gray looked up, and a large shadow fell over him, blocking the dim light. The ferocious goblin swung its massive fist. Gray managed to block it with his sword, but the impact sent him flying into a cloud of dust. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, his face covered in wounds. Gray struggled to sit up amidst the shattered earth, groaning in pain. He looked at the final sword in his hand. "Now, this is the only one I have left." He got to his feet to face the goblins and their warlord. "I have to face all 7 of them with just one sword?" Gray lowered his head, recalling his experiences from before his regression. "I know I can't win," he admitted helplessly. Even so, Gray still gripped his last sword tightly. He turned to Saria and yelled, "Master, run! Get out of here while they're focused on me." Saria just smirked, tightened her grip on her own sword, and replied, "Sorry, but I can't do that." Gray dodged the goblin's attacks, still trying to persuade her. "Are you planning to die here for nothing?" "Master, I'll follow right behind you. Don't worry about me." Saria replied, "It's not that." A flicker of helplessness crossed her eyes. She glanced down at the wound on her thigh. "I can't run anymore." Gray couldn't believe what he was hearing. He turned back to look at her, stunned. He then looked down at the last sword in his hand. "I'm out of options." Gray decided to fight a life-or-death battle. He had regressed to destroy the Purger. He swung his chipped sword, hoping to get some payback, but it shattered into pieces before his very eyes. Is this really how it all ends? In a place like this? Gray stood there, defenseless, surrounded by a horde of goblins. He still refused to give up. Gripping the hilt of his broken sword, he told himself, "No, it's not over yet." He recalled a moment in the past when he was cornered. "If I can unleash that power, I can take on this entire horde." The sword had shattered into large fragments. Gray told himself to remember that feeling as he raised the remaining piece of the blade, closed his eyes, and focused. Suddenly, a brilliant red power erupted. Gray lightly slashed through the necks of all the goblins in a single motion. The sword in his hand had transformed into a dense black aura. Saria watched in utter astonishment. Gray stood there, his face covered in blood, but he smiled to reassure her. "It's okay now." He swung his sword again and again, cutting down goblins in droves. Even the strongest among them was sliced in two. The goblin chief couldn't believe his eyes. Neither could Saria. She never expected her disciple to awaken such terrifying power. Meanwhile, she blocked a goblin's axe with just one hand. She calmly taunted it. "Too light." A glint appeared in Saria's eyes. "You've all caused me quite a bit of trouble." With a light swing of her arm, she sent the goblin flying. Saria thought to herself, "Without the war chief to enhance your strength, you're all nothing." It was past midnight. The two of them finally defeated the entire goblin horde. Gray spoke, his voice low but filled with emotion. "Somehow, we did it." He held up the broken sword apologetically. "I'm sorry. I broke your sword," Saria replied calmly. "Don't worry. You saved my life." She took the broken sword from him. Gray was still trembling from his recent attack, and before he could finish speaking, he suddenly collapsed. As he lay motionless on the ground, a panicked Saria rushed to his side, shouting, "Gray!" Gray slowly regained consciousness, his mind hazy. Where am I? He looked around, seeing only a vast expanse of thick, black water. A door floated in the air before him, emitting a mysterious black smoke. Gray realized this was the source of that power. The door continuously released streams of black aura. If I open it, will I obtain that power? He pondered this as he slowly approached it. But the moment he touched it, an invisible force seized him, paralyzing his body. Gray immediately recoiled from the door. He clutched his chest, struggling to breathe, his heart pounding. I don't know why, but if I open this door right now, I will die. A single tear rolled down his cheek as a message appeared in his mind. Wise decision. Gray snapped back to reality, his eyes flying open, his mind returning to the real world. He gasped for air, realizing he was lying in a small bed. Saria stood beside him, calling his name softly. "Gray, are you awake?" he asked weakly. "Where am I?" Saria replied, "In the village infirmary. You've been unconscious for 5 days." "I was afraid you wouldn't wake up," she said, her voice filled with worry. "So I've been asleep for 5 days. I must have overexerted myself, and it took a toll on my body." Saria shook her head. "I don't think overexerted even begins to describe what you did." As Gray sat up, Saria asked caringly, "Never mind that. Is your body okay? Can you get up?" Gray checked himself and noticed something was wrong. "I can't put any strength into my right arm. I can move it if I try with all my might, but will I ever be able to hold a sword again?" He looked at his bandaged arm and noticed strange black marks. "Moreover, this birthmark," Gray mumbled. Saria noticed he was having trouble moving his arm. "It's not moving well, is it?" Gray thought to himself. "Can't she see the birthmark?" He replied, "It's hard to use any strength in my dominant arm." Saria nodded as if she had expected it. "Just as I thought. It won't heal anytime soon. I mean, all the bones in your right arm were shattered," she added. Gray was completely shocked. My bones were shattered? But strangely, he didn't feel any pain. Saria pointed to a potion vial on the table. "We used a magic potion to treat it." Gray stared at the vial, stunned. "Aren't magic potions really expensive?" Saria sat down on the opposite bed to reassure him. "Don't worry, the village chief gave it to us." Gray was surprised. "The village chief? Why would he give it to someone like me?" Saria replied casually. "What are you talking about? Gray, you're the hero of this village." Gray was still confused when suddenly, a silver-haired man pushed the door open and shouted, "Gray!" He was flustered, clutching the potion vial. "Thank you for the magic potion, village chief." The chief interrupted him. "We're the ones who should be thanking you. We're talking about a goblin warlord here. That's a monster that couldn't be harmed, even when forces from the surrounding towns gathered together." The village chief continued, rushing to the bed and grabbing Gray's hand tightly. "If you hadn't killed it, the village would have been destroyed." He squeezed his hand with both of his eyes welling up with tears. "If it weren't for you and Saria, this potion, this infirmary, and the lives of the villagers would no longer exist," he said. Gray was flustered. "You're exaggerating, sir." The village chief shook his head. "You know I'm not exaggerating." Gray looked at the potion vial and thought to himself, maybe he's right. In the world before his regression, this village had been destroyed by goblins. The village chief stood up and bowed respectfully. "If you still don't realize the significance of what you've done, I'm willing to explain it in detail," he said, pausing for a moment. "I heard you'll be taking the entrance exam for the World Union Academy. Is that right?" Gray nodded. "Yes." He suddenly held his chin, deep in thought. "I went to kill the goblin 1 week before the exam. If I've been asleep for 5 days, that means there are only 2 days left." Gray's expression turned serious. "It takes 3 days to walk to the academy from here. I could get there in 1 day by horse, but I don't have any money." He quickly asked the village chief, "Sir, I'm sorry to ask, but could I possibly borrow a horse?" The village chief turned around and said as he walked, "I knew you would ask, so I've already prepared the best horse in the village. At that speed, you'll make it in time." Saria, standing nearby, added, "If you hadn't woken up today, we were planning to carry you there ourselves." Gray got out of bed, opened the door to the natural light, and was stunned by the scene outside. Hundreds of villagers were standing there cheering. "Congratulations on waking up." People were holding up a banner, shouting loudly, "Thank you, you have to pass the exam." Another person said, "Thank you for saving the entire village." A man came forward and handed Gray a small cloth pouch. "Gray, take this." Gray accepted the pouch and asked, "What is this?" The man replied, "It's something the whole village pitched in for you. We heard the registration fee for the academy is very expensive." Gray was moved, not knowing how to respond. "Thank you all so much." He prepared to leave, joking, "If I fail the exam now, it'll be hard for me to come back here." Saria reassured him. "Don't worry. She looked at him, her voice confident. No applicant at the academy can defeat a goblin warlord. Gray was still feeling insecure, touching his immobile right arm. But with my right arm like this, Saria cut him off. Your left arm still works fine, right? Gray checked his left arm. Yes, Saria continued. That's enough. You don't need to use that power. Gray turned to get on his horse, but muttered, the exam isn't easy enough to pass with just one hand. Saria approached him. It's okay, the examiners aren't blind. They won't overlook your abilities. I guarantee it. She looked him straight in the eye, her voice firm. You will definitely pass. Gray felt encouraged and thanked her very much. After what she said, there's no way I can fail now. He thought to himself, this village was destroyed in the previous world, but now it still exists. This world is different. The future can be changed with this power. Gray looked at the villagers one last time and said his goodbyes. I'm off. Not long after, he arrived at the exam site. He petted the horse. Thanks, buddy. I made it on time thanks to you. Gray looked up at the imposing castle before him. So this is the World Union Academy. The massive building stood out against the blue sky, majestic, like a challenge. Against the clear blue sky, an examiner's authoritative voice rang out. We will now begin distributing the exam papers. Until this process is complete, all candidates must remain in the central arena. As soon as the examiner finished speaking, a wave of whispers erupted from the crowd below. Are all of us candidates? Someone whispered, but only about 20 people will pass. A few candidates started discussing previous exams. I heard the number of successful candidates changes every year. Some years they accept 50 people, but in other years, only one person passes. The examiner's voice rang out again, silencing the noise. Now, please welcome Professor Ariel. Without keeping everyone waiting, a figure with long, fiery red hair appeared, drawing everyone's admiring gazes. She gave a mysterious smile and said, Let's get started right away. We will now distribute the exam papers. Candidates, please take the paper that appears in front of you. She snapped her fingers, and a strange golden light flashed high up in front of Gray. A piece of paper gradually formed from that light. He quickly reached out and took it, and the paper displayed the information. Candidate number 513, Swordsmanship Division. Seeing that everyone had received their papers, Professor Ariel announced from above, It seems everyone has their paper. Some of you may be surprised to see that the paper only lists your number and competition division. She continued in a serious tone. Rest assured, as it is every year, the World Union Academy does not discriminate based on age, gender, nationality, status, or anything else. She reached out, gripping the edge of the table and stated firmly, Even your name is of no importance to us. She gave a dark smile. The majestic entrance to the academy appeared in the middle of the path as Ariel's voice continued. Only those who pass the exam and earn the right to cross this bridge will be asked for their names. You can even use a fake name if you wish, she added. Gray looked at his exam paper with dissatisfaction, thinking to himself, I left my sword at the inn, yet it says I'm in the swordsmanship division. What kind of system is this? As if reading everyone's minds, Ariel spoke arrogantly. I have assigned your divisions based simply on looking at you. Her voice was cold and carried a threatening tone. If I am mistaken, please raise your hand and state your case. The bewildered crowd protested. She chose the divisions just by looking? She must be joking, right? There's no way she could do that with this many people. A few people came to their own conclusion. They must have checked up on us beforehand. Or maybe she's using mind-reading magic, another whispered. Seeing that no one raised their hand, Ariel looked pleased. It seems no one is in the wrong division, she continued. The waiting period is over. Next I will announce the exam schedule, so please check your tickets. Gray immediately looked at his paper, where a line of black text appeared. Candidate number 513, Swordsmanship Division, first day, 11 o'clock, 12 a.m. He panicked, lamenting internally. Damn it, my exam is on the very first day. I was hoping for more time for my hand to heal. After a moment of silence, Ariel warned him with a frighteningly serious expression. This is a one-time practical exam. If you're late, you will be automatically disqualified. Make sure to be on time. We do not accept any requests to change the schedule. Gray clutched his right arm, worried that he still couldn't put any strength into his dominant hand. Please heal by tomorrow, even just a little. In the blink of an eye, the day arrived. At the exam site, Gray looked at his injured arm in horror. It hadn't healed at all. I guess I'll have to take the test with my arm like this. Suddenly, the examiner's voice rang out, pulling Gray from his thoughts. Next examinee, please wait at the arena entrance. Gray took a deep breath, comforting himself. All right, I shouldn't be pessimistic right now. He clenched his right fist, thinking that his left hand was still working fine and his right hand could still move a little. Regaining his composure, Gray thought about how to pass the exam. I need to use this time to observe the examiner's movements and find an opening. Before his eyes, A sword fight between an examiner and an examinee was taking place. The examiner spoke, "You may strike first." The examinee immediately replied, "All right then." Without hesitation, the examinee charged at the examiner, shouting as he held his sword. He swung his sword, slamming it hard onto the wooden floor, creating a loud noise and a thick cloud of white smoke. When the smoke cleared, the examiner stood motionless, completely unharmed. The examinee yelled, "Ugh, I'm not done yet." He gathered all his strength and swung his sword at the examiner, but the examiner easily parried it, causing the examinee to panic. "No way!" In an instant, his sword was knocked away, and both he and his sword were sent flying, crashing hard onto the wooden floor, creating a loud bang. The examinee clutched his arm, his face pale, unable to get up. The examiner's cold voice rang out, "Your exam is over. Retrieve your weapon and leave the premises." The examinee mumbled, "Understood," his face clearly showing his disappointment. Witnessing this scene, Gray's lips twitched slightly, but inside, he was panicking. "I'm screwed." The examiner's voice urged, "Next, number 5, 113. Gray's face turned serious. "Yes," he thought to himself, "you're telling me to fight a man who just defeated a guy bigger than me." As if on cue, the examiner repeated, "You may strike first." Gray replied, "All right." Standing on the arena floor, Gray trembled while trying to comfort himself. "Honestly, I don't see any chance of winning, but I'll do whatever it takes." He charged straight at the examiner, shouting, "Here I come." As he ran, he recalled Sariel's words. "A sword isn't swung with just the arm. You channel the power of your entire body through your arm, carrying your determination and belief with it." Gray decided to cling to the hope Sariel had given him. "That's what you taught me, right, teacher?" Even though his right arm was powerless, he channeled strength through his other muscles. In an instant, his sword swung up, but the slash missed the examiner. A conflict arose within him, "But I can't fight like I normally do." If swinging a sword without arm strength were that easy, no one would bother with physical training. The image of the examiner appeared. He suddenly swung his sword at Gray. Observing the movement, Gray noticed his sword was a bit slow. Realizing this weakness, Gray managed to parry the blow. As he fought, he mused, "He has incredible power, but his speed and technique are no match for my teacher's. If I rely on her swordsmanship, I can make up for the difference." Gray continuously unleashed a flurry of swift sword strikes, confirming his theory. "That's right, he's slower." The examiner's expression twisted in panic, constantly on edge. Gray judged that he wasn't as strong as he had thought. An image of a smiling Sariel appeared, along with her words full of confidence. "You'll definitely pass." Sariel's encouragement fueled his burning heart, and Gray put all his strength into knocking away the examiner's sword. He thought to himself, "I can really do this." The fight between them was fierce, like a spectacular contest of speed. The examiner's attacks were relentless and steady. Gray raised his defense, but was still at a disadvantage, even though he had figured out his opponent's weakness. Despite seeing through his swordsmanship, Gray tightened his grip on his sword, preparing to counterattack. He didn't hesitate to attack the examiner's shoulder, but with his vast experience, the man easily dodged it. Gray became pensive, with no intention of giving up. He thought to himself, "The power gap is still too big. I can't break his stance. It's not easy to win with just one hand." Gray attacked continuously, using his fastest speed, and the examiner gradually revealed an opening. Gray assessed the situation. The man's movements were cruder, a bit risky. But if he acted now, he pulled his sword back, causing the examiner to lose his momentum. Gray was ready for his plan. "Now, come at me." Just as planned, the examiner lunged forward, and Gray's eyes glinted with confidence. That's right, he swings his sword too powerfully, making him predictable. He stepped back into a defensive stance. But instead of blocking, Gray nimbly circled behind him, causing the examiner to panic. Seeing his opponent on the defensive, Gray rejoiced inwardly. Despite the large power gap, all he had to do was get behind him, and he lunged forward. But the referee's voice rang out, "Stop!" Gray's blade was just a hair's breadth from touching the examiner through his thin clothes. Gray felt unwilling to accept it, his body exhausted. "Is the match over? Isn't it too soon?" The referee from the stands announced that the time limit for the match had expired, and the result was a draw. Gray was stunned and disappointed. "I didn't make it in time." He held his sword with trembling hands, then let them fall in acceptance. Gray turned and left the arena, telling himself, "I did my best, but if I can't even beat him, I'll have a hard time later on." He glanced back at the arena, his heart heavy. "Thank you, sir." 1 week later, in meeting room number 53 of the World Union Academy, 6 members of the organizing committee sat in a large room. The headmaster, an old man with glasses, spoke up. "What do you all think of the candidates? They have completed the exam." A brown-haired man replied indifferently, looking tired. An older examiner said cautiously, "The method of having everyone observe at once is a bit inefficient. Next year, we should divide the work. The mustached old man focused on the benefits. We can't afford to miss out on talent just to save some effort. The headmaster was helpless against their indifference. I was asking for your opinions on the students, not the testing system. Starting with the swordsmanship course, the headmaster said, as small holographic screens appeared on the table. Someone asked, who passed? The older examiner analyzed. As usual, anyone who defeated an examiner passes. For the rest, we'll consider the quality of their performance and their ability to last for 15 minutes. What do the swordsmanship course instructors think? He continued. Besides those who defeated the examiners, candidates number 517 and 753 stood out. The brown-haired man interjected, keep the list at that. The others won't be able to keep up even if they pass. The mustached man agreed. I concur. Any other opinions? The room fell silent. The headmaster concluded, we will now confirm the acceptance list for the swordsmanship course. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. What about candidate number 513? It was Ariel, the red-haired girl who had been silent the whole time. What does everyone think about candidate number 513? The man with the glasses grew thoughtful. The mustached man pulled up the screen showing Gray's match. This kid? He seemed close to winning, but he had to use a trick. He'll have a hard time keeping up later. He's skilled, but his power is still weak. I saw him being overwhelmed from start to finish, another person said. The principal hesitated. He pursed his lips, dismissing the thought of adding Gray. Ariel sighed in exasperation. With so many people watching, how could no one have noticed? Letting everyone watch like this was a complete waste. The discussion ended, and the next day, everyone came to receive their results. Gray was present, holding the notice for examinee number 513 of the swordsmanship course. The first day, 11 in the morning, the loudspeaker blared. We will now announce the accepted applicants for the swordsmanship course, a total of 6 students. Gray felt his heart pound. This was it. The loudspeaker continued. For those who have been accepted, your notice will automatically catch fire. Examinee numbers 5, 217, 432, 615, 753, and 925. Gray was stunned. Despair. So I really failed. The loudspeaker announced, will the accepted applicants please cross the bridge and complete your enrollment procedures today? The atmosphere was chaotic, a mixture of joy and sorrow. Gray hung his head, his heart heavy. Suddenly, the loudspeaker continued. Next is the announcement for the Divine Eye Special Admission, examinee number 513. Gray's paper burst into blue flames, making him the center of attention. Staring at the flames, Gray was in disbelief. Did I actually pass? The crowd began to whisper, most of them scornfully. The Divine Eye Special Admission. They picked someone like him? The other accepted students jeered. Isn't that just a backdoor admission? This academy has really gone downhill. Gray's mind raced. A backdoor admission? I don't know anyone here. Could it have been my master? But I didn't hear anything about it. An old man leaning on a cane stepped forward to reprimand them. Don't speak so carelessly about the Divine Eye Special Admission. It is a prestigious honor that has produced heroes for 100 years. They paid him no mind. You old-timers are obsessed with the Divine Eye. Isn't that just some tale of past glory? Another person said. All the recent Divine Eye students have been total failures. Amy Wobble, Jacob Bloom. Gray silently endured the scornful remarks. A whole string of failures, so much so that even the current applicants knew about them. But the names Amy Wobble and Jacob Bloom sparked a glimmer of hope in him. They were once the main force that stood against El King. Is my name now being mentioned in the same breath as theirs? A gentle morning light washed over the academy, bathing everything in a tranquil glow. The main building stood majestically amidst a thin layer of mist, and the surrounding canal flowed serenely. A bustling crowd streamed in as the loudspeaker announced, the entrance ceremony will begin in 30 minutes. If you have finished changing into your uniforms, please gather at the plaza in front of the main office. Groups of students in dark blue uniforms with gold trim began to appear on the stone walkways, the academy's silver emblem gleaming on the left side of their chests. Among the crowd, Gray walked with a calm demeanor, exuding a cold and unreadable aura. A few students gathered together, looking around awkwardly. This is the plaza in front of the main office, right? One boy asked quietly. The friend beside him replied, I don't know. Are we even in the right place? Suddenly, a figure came rushing toward them, panting heavily. My apologies. There was a mix-up, so the preparations have been delayed. A student asked quizzically. Preparations? The man continued. Could you all please step back a little so I can set up the stage? Everyone exchanged confused glances but stepped back as he asked. Is this far enough? He asked, turning back with a smile. That's plenty. Amidst their confusion, he knelt and placed his hands on the ground, murmuring, Here we go. A radiant magic circle enveloped the space, its intricate magical lines weaving together, emitting a brilliant golden light like an exploding sun. Streaks of orange-red lightning zipped through the glow, creating an intense and supernatural aura. The ground trembled, and the air felt compressed by an immense energy. The crowd stared wide-eyed in astonishment at a power that was beyond their comprehension. In an instant, it all vanished, leaving the air clear as if after a storm. The man stood up calmly. "Sorry for the delay. Please, feel free to sit wherever you'd like." The students were still stunned, their lips trembling. Yes. They glanced around at each other. One person was bewildered. That was a teleportation spell, wasn't it? Another gritted their teeth. They teleported something this massive? Gray sat down in his seat, thinking they probably wanted to hold the entrance ceremony in a place with a clear view of the school. What a waste of a teleportation spell. He turned his head and smiled brightly. This is the power of the World Union Academy. He overheard two people chatting. There are a lot of seats, aren't there? Only 30 students were accepted, so why do we need so many chairs? The short-haired girl gave a wry smile. You don't know? The other girl seemed a bit offended. Sorry, I don't know much about anything besides swordsmanship. The short-haired girl smiled. Let me explain. She twirled her finger rhythmically. The World Union Academy, as its name suggests, gathers the best students from all over the globe. She exclaimed, "Look, they're here." The other girl was startled, her eyes widening as she looked where she was pointing. In the blue sky, enormous airships glided through the clouds. Their polished hulls reflected the early morning light. Their sails billowed with wind like majestic flying warships. Weaving between the airships were giant dragons, soaring on immense, outstretched wings. The girl shouted, "What is all this?" The airships were imposing and majestic, while Gray stared in utter amazement. The magical airship, the Shaw Queen. I was on it once when I joined the Purger Annihilation Squad. I heard it's one of the largest airships in the world, and they're bringing it out just for the entrance ceremony. He thought to himself, as expected of the World Union Academy. The airship landed, kicking up clouds of dust. A group of people with stone-cold expressions walked in. The principal happily leaned on the podium. It seems everyone has arrived. Then let's begin the entrance ceremony. The speakers blared. Thank you, Mr. Principal, for the speech. Gray crossed his arms and yawned. So the entrance ceremony is pretty ordinary after all. He was surprised to hear his name being called. Next up is a greeting from the valedictorian of each department. Leon Hart, valedictorian of the swordsmanship department. Please give your speech. Leon stood up and bowed politely. Yes. He walked down amidst whispers of praise. He defeated the examiner in a single blow. I heard his swordsmanship is on par with the instructors. Leon bowed deeply, placing a hand over his heart to greet the professors. I am Leon Hart. He truly is an outstanding student. His face radiated a serious aura. Gray sighed pensively. Leon asked politely, May I speak freely? The professor smiled. Of course. Leon thanked him. He turned sharply to face the students. I have something to say. First, congratulations to everyone who was accepted legitimately. It is an honor to be enrolled here with you all. He placed a hand on his chest, showing his sincere desire to graduate and contribute to the world. Let's all strive to do our best. I look forward to the days we will all grow together at this prestigious academy. But unfortunately, there is one person among us who is unworthy of standing here. Isn't that right, Professor God's Eye Ariel? Ariel, who had her eyes closed enjoying the atmosphere, was startled at the mention of her name, but quickly regained her composure. All the students here have passed a rigorous examination. Even if they aren't as strong as you, it would be unreasonable to expel them. Why are you asking me this? Leon's expression grew stern, his eyes filled with indignation. I'm not talking about those who passed fairly, but about the student who was specially admitted by a professor's favor. God's Eye, he shouted, pointing toward the students. Step forward, return your uniform, and leave this academy immediately. The students erupted in murmurs, and Gray grew anxious. Why is he being so intense? Good thing he doesn't know what I look like. If I stay quiet, I probably won't be found out. Ariel chuckled. This year's freshmen are quite a rowdy bunch, Leon protested indignantly. Professor, I am serious. Please stop admitting students through the back door. With a whoosh like the wind, Ariel appeared behind Leon and whispered, Do you think you're stronger than that student? Leon shouted. What? Of course, am I wrong? Ariel laughed, amused. I like that attitude. So let's make a bet. Leon was surprised. A bet? Ariel calmly crossed her arms, her lips curling into a confident smirk. I'll bet my entire professorship and that kid's admission on it. Gray was taken aback by her words, choking slightly. A bet? Leon, also confused, asked, Professor Ariel, are you trying to make me fight that special admission brat? Ariel didn't even open her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. I wouldn't do something so crude. She adjusted her glasses and looked straight at Leon. Besides, if he went all out, you'd die. As a teacher, I can't let a student be put in danger. Veins popped on Leon's face as he glared angrily. Are you provoking me? Ariel remained calm. I'm being serious, so let's bet on monsters instead of people. It's safer. She paused, then continued. Besides, you're better at fighting monsters than people, right? Leon grew even angrier. So you know all about me, huh? What's the exact bet then? Ariel gave a faint smile, as if her plan was succeeding. Raising a hand, she said, It's simple. You just have to kill the monster I choose as the target. Professor Ariel explained the rules for each round, with the monster getting stronger each time. The first one to fail to kill the target loses. Gray sat in his chair, rubbing his head helplessly. Ariel continued, If he loses, I'll resign and all the special admission students will be expelled. If you lose, you have to do everything I say. Leon's defiant expression was reflected in Ariel's glasses. She acted as if it was nothing, holding out her hand to Leon. Well, he touched the sword at his hip. Tell me the targets first. Even though I'm confident I can handle any opponent, I don't want to fall into some stupid trap. Ariel placed a hand on her chin, considering. Let's see. For the first target, how about a goblin general? Or is that too easy for you? The students in the hall were shocked. Gray crossed his arms, thinking carefully. A goblin general? She chose that specific one? In contrast, Leon slammed his hand on the table in anger. Are you kidding me? Sweat broke out on his forehead. A goblin general isn't the kind of monster one person can take down alone. Ariel chuckled lightly. I never said you had to kill it right away. The deadline is within this year. That's reasonable, right? Leon shouted. If someone could take down a disaster-level monster alone after just 1 year of training, people wouldn't be struggling so much. Pick a more realistic target. He paused, panting. Then a smile spread across his face as he clenched his fist. You deliberately chose a monster no one can defeat so that no one wins, right? I disagree. Ariel stepped closer. So let's add a condition. If it's a draw, you win. Leon was stunned. Huh? Ariel continued. In other words, if that brat can't take down the goblin general, I'll be automatically fired, and the special admission students will be expelled. She gave a playful wink. How about it? Leon asked in disbelief. Are you insane? I feel like the outcome of this bet is already decided. Ariel turned to leave, still smiling. Then I'll take that as you, not objecting. Leon added a condition. It has to be a goblin general at full strength, not a weakened one. Ariel held out her hand, and a stream of light appeared. With a wave, a pen and a blank sheet of paper materialized. I've written the details into this magic contract. The contract floated in the air. If there are no issues, sign it. Leon read it carefully and then signed. I'm in. He then asked, But do you really believe that brat can win? Ariel paid him no mind, turning to leave. Who knows? Ariel returned to her seat and sat down calmly. The hall buzzed with whispers about the contract. What's wrong with Professor Ariel? Maybe she's using this bet as an excuse to retire. She's been past her prime for a long time. Ariel ignored the sarcastic remarks, smiled as she looked at the contract. Gray sighed helplessly. Great, the bet is officially on. He opened his eyes and considered, wait a minute. Why do I get the feeling she even factored me beating her son before enrollment into this bet? The deadline is within this year. Ariel noticed Gray staring intently. Gray thought it over. The bet was decided from the very beginning. Ariel brought her index finger to her lips, signaling, Don't you dare say the truth. Gray exclaimed, She really plays dirty. The teacher on the platform calmly began. Now we will begin the introductory lesson on magic. He placed the book on the table. Some of you might be surprised that the lecture is starting on the very first day, but as students of this academy, you must remember not to waste even a single day. He raised his hand, emitting a blue light, starting with how to use magic. The teacher continued to lecture about magic. Within the body exists an invisible source of energy, called, by channeling it through your magic circuits, you can. The teacher lectured attentively, and the students listened seriously. Gray thought, I was worried I wouldn't be able to keep up, but this is manageable. I already learned this stuff at the training camp. He looked at the blonde-haired guy sitting in the front row, in the same class as him again. I could have chosen a different class. He rested his cheek on his hand in frustration. Please don't let anyone find out. I'm the special admission student with the God's Eye. A voice cut through his thoughts. Hey you look bored. It hasn't even been 5 minutes and you're already looking away. Gray stammered. I'm sorry, he thought to himself. He noticed with just a glance, even though I'm sitting all the way in the back row. The professor closed his book. If you're so confident, why don't you show the class? You must know basic magic. Gray stood up awkwardly. Sir, we're in the swordsmanship course. I thought it was okay not to know magic. The professor reminded him, even if you only use a sword in battle, you still need to know basic magic to coordinate with mages. You have to understand the feeling of controlling it. Gray froze for a moment. Just like at the training camp, he asked. The spell we're about to learn is E-Bullet, right? The teacher turned back to the platform. Oh, you know it? Can you use it? Gray replied, yes. He breathed a sigh of relief. That hellish training camp wasn't for nothing. The teacher said, this is a good opportunity. We'll turn this into a match. Leon, you can use E-Bullet, right? Leon stood up. Of course. I was trained in both swordsmanship and magic before enrolling. Isn't it a bit reckless to have him actually fight me? The teacher was firm. Even with a large skill gap, we're only using E-Bullet. He won't die. And I'm not telling you to go easy on him. He added, but that gray-haired kid is this year's special admission student with the God's Eye. Leon was stunned. Huh? The whole class turned to look at Gray with surprised eyes. Gray was flustered by the attention. He spilled everything. Leon slammed the table. So that's how it is. In that case, I'll have to teach him a proper lesson. He looked at Gray and growled, get up here. Gray was speechless. The two of them stepped onto the platform, facing each other. The professor stood between them and announced the rules. When I give the signal, fire an E-Bullet at your opponent. Gray was on guard. I've only been learning magic for a few days. Even if the teacher said I won't die, I probably won't come out unscathed. The professor shouted, begin. Leon summoned his magic. A challenge. I'll show you the difference in our power. Gray didn't back down, trying to summon the best magic he could. Screw it, there's no other choice. Two orbs of power flew towards each other. Suddenly, they both clashed. Boom! The resulting blast of light shot straight towards Leon, forcing him to back away, narrowly dodging it. Leon panicked, his eyes wide with terror, screaming in horror as the beam of light drew closer, its power threatening to swallow him whole. Suddenly, a man rushed forward, spreading his arms to shield him, his face showing unshakable resolve amidst the intense blast of light. Instantly, the space lit up as bright as day. The man stood there, nearly frozen, just staring blankly at the scene before him. He almost let out a sigh of relief, his trembling hand wiping the beads of sweat from his forehead, his heart still reeling from the shock. The beam of light began to shatter, large cracks appearing amidst the dazzling flashes. Suddenly, a fearless young man decisively leaped straight into the center of the light. A powerful gust of wind swept through as he appeared, making the audience in the hall tremble. They instinctively raised their hands to shield their faces, their hearts pounding at the intense scene. The young man knelt to block the blue beam of light, his eyes blazing with a sacrificial spirit. But in less than 5 minutes, he collapsed onto the floor, screaming in agony. The man instantly rushed over like a gust of wind, asking worriedly, Lon, are you okay? Lon was trembling uncontrollably. He looked up at the man before him, struggled to his feet, and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, replying softly, I'm fine. His voice was faint but resolute. The man didn't press further, simply nodding. Is that so? What a relief. But his gaze remained sharp, scanning the room with extreme vigilance. If not for the force-dampening barrier, Leon probably wouldn't have survived. The room was now a wreck, completely shrouded in dust. The suffocating atmosphere seemed to crush everyone. Not even the professors could fire an E-Bullet with such power. The man tilted his head, his voice sharp with anger. What in the world did you just do? The young man didn't answer immediately, instead looking down at his hand. He frowned in thought. Was it really that weak? This definitely wasn't the spell I used. His pupils constricted as his mind raced in confusion. Could the E-Bullet I learned in the suppression squad be different from what the academy teaches? He clenched his fists, his eyes red with fury. Then he raised a hand to his chest and asked respectfully, Did I use the wrong spell? The man sighed, replying with a sense of helplessness. It was definitely an E-Bullet, but its quality was on another level. What you just used wasn't ordinary E, but super compressed E in faux form, a powerful form of energy contained within a radiant sphere of light. His words caused a commotion throughout the hall. Awed whispers spread through the crowd. Super compressed E, unheard of. A barrage of questions arose as all eyes were glued to the young man. The man continued in an authoritative tone. That's a form of energy that even the professors find difficult to produce, yet you managed to form it and cast it as a spell in a single moment. No one else in this academy can replicate what you just did. The moment he finished, the room erupted once more with non-stop chatter. That's the first time I've ever seen such a powerful E-Bullet. Could the divine admissions selection have been in preparation for this very moment? The young man thought to himself they should have just put him in the magic course instead of granting him special admission. He was filled with conflicting thoughts. All the spells taught by the suppression squad are like this, and I'm weaker than most of the team, always the first one down in a fight, he asked with a stern face. Are you joking with me, Professor? The professor replied firmly. Anyone could do it with the right training. The corners of his lips curled into a mysterious smile. The young man, Gray, was dumbfounded, not understanding the professor's meaning. The professor let out a hearty laugh, his eyes crinkling, which made Gray freeze in confusion. Suddenly, the professor leaned in close and suggested seriously, Why don't you transfer to the magic course? I will personally guarantee your spot. Your aptitude for magic far surpasses your skill with a sword. Gray looked away, embarrassed, and tightened his fists. I must refuse. I was told I'm not very good at magic, the professor yelled, his voice full of outrage. Are you messing with me? You've mastered E-compression techniques enough to create super-compressed E at your age. You are a once-in-a-generation genius, even by the Academy's standards. I personally guarantee it. Anyone who says you have no talent clearly knows nothing. He paused, his voice lowering. Gray, are you sure you don't want to switch to the magic course? The entire hall gasped in amazement at the rare praise from the notoriously strict professor. He pointed directly at Gray, his voice filled with killing intent. It would be a great loss to the world if you don't study magic. I'd even call it a crime against magic. Gray just chuckled lightly, his heart filled with mixed emotions. Suddenly, he was startled, thinking to himself, wait, the E-compression technique. I've heard of it from the old days. Back when humans didn't know about OD, or life force, casting magic was very difficult. They had to compress E in their bodies, mixing it randomly with OD. Bella suddenly spoke up. Thinking back on it is ridiculous, isn't it? Gray continued. Professor, do you know about OD? The man thought for a moment, then asked back, what is OD? Seeing that reaction, Gray was stunned to realize that the present world didn't know about the suppressive OD from the future. His eyes widened, his heart pounded. I have to be careful. I can't just reveal this carelessly. He clenched his fists, his eyes burning with determination. The man asked again, so, do you want to switch to the magic course? Gray bowed respectfully and replied, I'm sorry, I don't love swordsmanship, but I'm grateful for the offer. I still have to refuse. The man sighed. If that's your choice, I have no say. Then he held his hand, his voice warm. If you change your mind, just come find me anytime. Gray scratched his head, smiling. Thank you very much, sir. The man pointed to the stands. Go back to your seat. I won't blame you if you're distracted during class, or even leave because you're bored. This lecture is too basic for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hall was stunned. The crowd whispered in awe at Professor Ko's high praise for Gray. As he walked away, a man adjusted his tie, his voice awkward but warm. Sir Gray. He was startled, a chill running down his spine. What is this? Why did I just get the shivers? As evening fell, Gray was summoned to an office. He strode down the empty hallway, a letter in his hand, filled with doubt. Is Professor CL trying to convince me to switch courses again? Standing before an exquisitely carved wooden door, he hesitated, rereading the letter, then knocked. A voice from inside called out, Gray, right? It's unlocked. He bowed his head and entered. Excuse me. Suddenly, a figure lunged at him. Reacting instantly, Gray drew his sword and thrust forward without hesitation. A terrified girl fell to the ground, her mouth agape. He held his stance, stunned. What the hell? Looking at the girl trembling at the tip of his sword, he was startled. Where have I seen her before? The girl looked up, her eyes a mix of fear and curiosity, making Gray's heart pound unexpectedly. A voice from the side spoke in admiration. Oh, not bad at all. Ariel smiled confidently. I knew my eye for talent wasn't wrong. The man with the parted hair, in an interrogating tone, turned to Bella. You didn't hold back just now, did you? Were you saving your strength? He observed, his gaze sharp. Your movements were perfect, but losing your sword that easily is completely unnatural. Gray instinctively glanced at Bella, thinking to himself, so it really is the upright Bella. Looking at her now, she was no different from the image in his future memories. Ariel paid it no mind. She scoffed lightly, her voice full of contempt. Are you serious? If you can't even tell after all that, maybe you all should just quit being teachers. The man with the parted hair grew flustered and awkward. Ah, we were just kidding. Gray still stood there bewildered, caught between confusion and curiosity. He spoke up, his voice hesitant. Professor, what are you all doing? Ariel beamed and began to explain. We made a bet on whether you could block Bella Law's surprise attack. Thanks to you, I won big. She tossed something toward Gray. He deftly caught it, and as he opened his hand, his eyes widened in surprise. A gold coin? This is a fortune. The mustached man finally had to acknowledge it. He had been watching the match intently, his gaze fixed on Gray since their last exchange. The mustached man remarked that it looked like he was intentionally not using his dominant hand. The bearded man nodded, analyzing the situation. It's probably an injury, but not a simple muscle strain. Something deeper. Gray clutched his aching arm. He silently admitted they were absolutely right. The other man agreed. A common injury wouldn't cause that. Gray looked at them in disbelief. You can tell just by looking, the bearded man replied. His tone was matter of fact. If we couldn't even recognize something like that, how could we be professors at this academy? The man with the parted hair added, besides, Professor Ariel has known about this since the entrance exam. Ariel cut in coldly. If you understand, then leave. He's my student. and I'm not handing him over to anyone." The two men turned and left, the man with the parted hair leaving a compliment. "We acknowledge his potential," but as the bearded man passed by, his eyes were sharp and cold. "If that injury doesn't heal, he won't meet the Academy's admission standards. Remember that." Now, only Professor Ariel, Bella, and Gray remained in the room. Ariel spoke, her voice tinged with mystery. "Now that the pests are gone, let's talk about magic." She looked at Gray with a sharp gaze. "I heard you used super compressed E in Professor Carlos's class." Gray didn't hide it. "So you already know," Ariel recounted. "He came to my office and told me to transfer you to the magic department, but of course, I refused." Ariel revealed her other eye, which shone as brightly as a star. "You're better suited for swordsmanship than magic." Seeing that eye for the first time, Gray couldn't help but be stunned. Ariel explained in a meticulous tone, "You show no signs of being skilled at compressing mana, not a single indication that you've ever trained in it." Gray thought to himself, "Those eyes can tell just by looking. It's best not to lie." He answered honestly, "It's just as you say." Ariel pressed further, curious about her student. "May I ask, what method did you use? I promise not to tell anyone, and I'll even give you a reward." She glanced over at Bella. "I need to know for her sake." Gray almost let it slip but stopped himself in time, breathing a sigh of relief. He had almost called her a mage. Ariel looked at Bella's troubled expression and shared, "That's right, she's a genius in magic theory, but her practical application is lacking." Ariel was troubled and worried. "I don't understand why she can't compress E properly. That's why she can't create super compressed E," Gray observed Bella. He recalled what he knew. "I heard Bella was a late bloomer, so this is why." Ariel continued, "Carlos said that when you used super compressed E, it didn't look like you were compressing E at all. If there's a way to use super compressed E without actually compressing E, she won't be transferred to Professor Vajian B." Hearing that name, the color drained from Gray's face. His eyes filled with horror. He exclaimed agitatedly, "Professor Vajian Blay? Is it really him?" Ariel nodded. "Yes, it seems you know of him." Gray's mind reeled. How could he not know? The man was infamous. Memories flooded back of piles of bodies at Vajian's feet, of countless experiments on human bodies. An entire town burned to the ground, dozens dead from a magical disaster. To Gray, Vajian Blay was nothing less than a mass murderer. He blurted out, "He's the most notorious magic criminal in history. Hasn't he been caught yet?" Ariel was worried that if Bella couldn't create super compressed E by the end of the year, she would be transferred to where he performs his surgeries. Gray was horrified and couldn't sit still. "What? That's not good at all." Ariel guessed Bella's tragic fate, realizing that despite the excuse of enhancing magical abilities, it was human experimentation. "I've seen the bodies of those who died with their eyes wide open from injustice." She paused, her voice resolute. "I'd rather let her drop out of school than let that guy lay a hand on her." After a moment of silence, Bella spoke up, her voice trembling. "That's really dangerous. But if I can't use super compressed E, I'll be expelled." Gray grew pensive, his heart heavy with worry. "The magical knowledge I possess comes from a future that doesn't exist in this era. If I were to speak of it, I could alter history." Seeing Bella tremble, Gray's gaze seemed to curse fate. He remembered a future of annihilation at the hands of the Purger, where warriors fell in the blink of an eye. "Is that the future I want?" His expression softened as he set down his teacup, his voice filled with determination. "I get it. I'll teach you." A sphere of dark magic materialized in Gray's hand in the Ina Academy courtyard. Everyone fell silent, listening intently as he explained the principles of magic. Gray said frankly, "This is all the knowledge I have." He then added in a serious tone, "Don't tell anyone that I'm the one who taught you this." Ariel said playfully, "Of course. We even have a magic contract. Break the rules and you die." Reassured, Gray asked, "After everything I've explained, what do you think?" Even Ariel, a professor, was stunned. Just the theoretical part alone was astonishing. Bella was a quick study, finding it exciting, concise, and coherent, like taking a magic class from 100 years in the future. She genuinely felt that just listening to his explanation had advanced the history of magic by 100 years. Gray was pleased but not arrogant, thinking that this was his lecture from 10 years in the future. For this era, it was like something from a century ahead. Ariel asked doubtfully, "Is everything you said for real?" But Bella had faith. The theory was perfectly logical and didn't contradict any existing magical principles. The quickest way to verify it was through a practical test. She looked at Gray expectantly. "If what you said is true, then this spell should work." Bella put down the paper and stepped forward. Following the theory, Bella raised her magic staff and began to form a magic circle. Gray hesitated, remembering how Bella Bright's full power could incinerate an entire city, and in the blink of an eye, the magic circle swelled to an immense size, covering the entire area. In the past, Bella had been unable to control her vast magical energy. Before Gray could stop her, his own body started to fade. Wait a minute! From the schoolyard, a torrent of magical energy erupted like a volcano, leaving everyone stunned. Underneath that terrifying power, Gray shielded his face with his hand, muttering to himself, "Now this is what you call truly overwhelming power. Absolutely terrifying." He still trembled when he recalled that moment, knowing that if Bella had been even a split second slower in controlling her magic, he would have likely been vaporized in that inferno. Luckily, she had saved his life. He remembered the ferocious flames charging toward him, only to suddenly reverse course and swirl back toward Bella as if guided by an unseen force. Just then, Bella broke into a radiant smile, her eyes twinkling with joy. She cheered, I did it! I finally controlled it!" In the sky above, the flames swirled in a perfect orbit, gradually converging on a single point. From that point, a magnificent fire dragon emerged, soaring through the air, its brilliant red light illuminating the entire land. Seeing this, Gray gave a slight smile, whispering, "That's truly incredible." But at that very moment, Bella's vision blurred and her eyes fluttered shut, her body swaying as if she was about to collapse. She whispered weakly, "I'm out of E now." Before she could finish the sentence, she collapsed. Gray panicked and rushed to catch her, calling out her name, "Bella, Bella!" Ariel, who was nearby, quickly approached and said in a calm, reassuring voice, "Gray, she's just exhausted from running out of E. Let her rest for a bit and she'll be fine." Hearing that, Gray sighed in relief, his gaze softening as he looked at Bella. He felt a warmth in his heart, mixed with pride at seeing this small girl achieve the impossible. Looking at the remaining embers in the sky, Ariel exclaimed in amazement, "In such a short amount of time, Bella La created magic on this scale. Her talent is truly rare." Bella, though dazed, still managed to mumble, "It's not that I'm good, it's the theory. The theory helped me create super compressed E." Gray frowned slightly, thinking to himself, "But you're the one who came up with that theory. Bella, how can you still be so modest?" But he didn't say it out loud, just quietly looked at her with an admiring gaze. Ariel sighed, turned to Gray, and said, "She managed to create super compressed E, which means the surgery is no longer necessary. I'll tell Bradley to cancel the surgery. It's a good thing we avoided that risk." But then she grew pensive, her voice tinged with worry. "Even so, I'm still worried Bella might lose control of her mana." Gray asked in surprise. "Control of her mana? What do you mean?" Ariel explained. "Bradley's surgery can increase mana output, but the price is the ability to control it. It forcibly breaks the body's limits, and the exact mechanism is still a secret, but I've heard it's a very risky process." Gray stroked his chin, musing. "So is that why the mages in the previous world couldn't control their powerful mana?" Ariel nodded, and then suddenly smiled. "But thanks to you, Bella has achieved the impossible, creating super compressed E. So, the condition of our contract has been fulfilled. Now it's my turn to do my part." Her gaze fell on Gray's right arm as she continued. "First, I want to use magic on your arm." Ariel raised her hand, and a brilliant blue light emanated from her palm. Tiny magical butterflies floated around, shimmering like a dream. She moved closer, channeling that mana into Gray's right arm. After a moment, Ariel asked, "How do you feel?" Gray looked down at his arm, gently trying to clench and unclench his fist. He exclaimed in astonishment, I can move it!" Overcome with joy, he clenched his fist tightly and looked at Ariel with a grateful expression. "Thank you, Professor. But even magic recovery potions couldn't heal it. How did you do this?" Ariel smiled. "Don't compare my nerve restoration magic with some common potions." She stepped closer and asked, "But does it move like it used to? Try using your sword." Gray nodded and stepped forward. He gripped the hilt of his sword, drew it, and swung a few basic slashes, but then he stopped, looking at his arm and thinking to himself, "It doesn't feel as flexible as before." He said frankly, "My arm isn't back to how it was." Ariel nodded, unsurprised. "Just as I thought. I can heal the nerves, but my magic can't heal the wound in your soul." Gray was surprised. "My soul? What do you mean?" Ariel explained, "Although magical science hasn't proven the existence of the soul, I believe it's real. With this eye," she pointed to her eye, from which a brilliant light flashed, "I can see that your soul is gradually recovering. As long as you don't overexert yourself, it will heal on its own over time." Gray looked at his arm and exclaimed, "My body is recovering?" He then asked, "Do you mean I shouldn't train too hard?" Ariel shook her head. "No, you can still train normally, but I'm curious what kind of swordsmanship could cause this level of damage to the soul?" Gray scratched his head awkwardly and didn't answer. Ariel continued, her voice lowered. "There are sword styles that utilize the soul, and I suspect you learned yours from Amy. Why?" Hearing that name, Gray was startled, his expression stiffening. He thought to himself, "How does she know Amy? At this point in time, Amy and I haven't even met yet." Seeing him silent, Ariel asked, "Did I say something wrong?" The way you wield your sword is very similar to Amy. Wise, but with a slight difference. Your teacher seems to surpass even her. Gray was momentarily startled, his heart racing. She even knows about that. I have to change the subject, or I'll let something slip, he quickly said. I learned swordsmanship at a dojo in my hometown, but are there really sword techniques that can harm the soul? Ariel waved her hand dismissively. No, ordinary sword techniques can't do that, but you're hardly ordinary. A single sword strike killed General Orr and destroyed the entire surrounding forest. That kind of power is anything but ordinary. Gray knew he'd been exposed and had to admit it, so you already know, Ariel said nonchalantly. Of course I've examined the scene. The remnants left behind were truly impressive. That mysterious power inside you, you used it, didn't you? Gray was astonished. You could see it? Professor Ariel nodded. I saw it through the chained door. Gray was startled, thinking to himself. The chained door. There's no way she could have guessed. She actually saw it, Ariel continued. I've seen a power similar to yours before, but it wasn't exactly the same. There are those who possess it, and they are called the Purifiers. Hearing that name, Gray's face darkened. He muttered, Why would that name appear here? Ariel noticed the change and asked, You've heard that name before, haven't you? A torrent of chaotic thoughts flooded Gray's mind. He wondered why the name, the Purifiers, would surface at a time like this. What is going on? Yeah,